and said, "What about breakfast at Fishney's?" It's Tuesday morning, 7:20 a.m. You know what that means. It's the Fish Report with yours truly, Mike Fisher. And there's IndyCar Tim. We're hanging out in the fancy studios, IndyCar Tim's fancy studios. We'll call this the Fish Report studios for the purpose of the next few minutes.
Randy.
I'm Mike Fisher, your trusty and trusted reporter, of course, IndyCar Tim Ham, or the 75-member staff who does his thing at cowboyscountry.com and here and beyond. And, of course, works with the incredible, legendary Norm Hitzkiss as well. How's Norm doing? Doing good?
Norm's doing well. He's doing very well. He's plugging away at 80 years old and still putting out shows every day. How you like that?
Well, I love it. And surfing on his coattails on the Fish Report is fine by me. One of the things, Norm has seen it, I've seen it, you've seen it, 74,000 fish hens in Cowboys Nation. Can't be wrong. You all have seen it too. And we have the T-shirt at the fish store, just to remind you, if I made this up, Second Chance Valley Ranch. And this dates to a time when, of course, before the Star, when the Cowboys headquarters was in the Valley Ranch neighborhood in Capel, and they weren't clever enough to give the building a name. So they just adopted the name of the neighborhood, and they called it Valley Ranch.
And you know you're old when you still refer to the Star as Valley Ranch, which I do from time to time. I have to get
Yes, that's you're a little bit deranged, you're a little bit wobbly on that, but I get you. And where Second Chance Valley Ranch comes from, the motto, the T-shirt, and the philosophy, it's straight Jerry Jones. And Tim, we can rattle off, and again, we will, as always, I will refer to your comments throughout the day and check out your comments. Jerry's got a philosophy, and it's two-pronged. The first one, very sincerely, mostly sincerely, is he believes that giving people a second chance when they screw up is the American way. And he really does. And he'll point out, if I hadn't been given a second chance along the way, I wouldn't be me. And that's true of you, and that's true of you, and that's true of all of us. And as I've said to him on a few occasions, the other reason, Jerry, that you believe in second chances for players is if they run a 4.340 or got 17 sacks in their final year in college. So along comes now Mike Green, pass rusher in college, ended up at Marshall. And the reason he ended up at Marshall is he got semi-kicked out of Virginia because of a second sexual
wasn't an assault.
Sexual something.
Yeah.
Harassment, assault, somewhere in between. All, of course, alleged. The first one happened in high school. And he says, I was never interviewed by the cops. It just was a thing. And then but he said, I'm innocent. The second one at Virginia was the result of an anonymous tip. And he had signed a deal when he entered Virginia because of the high school thing where like zero tolerance. It signed like a contract with the school, zero tolerance. So here comes this accusation. Doesn't seem very fair.
No.
And he said, the accusation made me say, fine, I'll leave. Not that the school made him leave. I'm not sure of all that. He ends up at Marshall. He gets 17 sacks. 6'3", 250. He can fly. And Dave Brugler, Tim, in February, put him down as the number 12 player in this draft. Well, it just so happens the Cowboys draft 12th. So how much do you want to go? And I'm not saying that I'm not projecting Mike Green at 12 for the Cowboys. There's so much wide receiver buzz. Isn't that where we're kind of stuck?
I hope.
Yeah, it makes sense. Not that we wanted to draft a position. As always, I wanted to draft a player, not a position. But what if Mike Green slips? We talk a lot about the idea of the Cowboys trading back from 12. And so I don't want to make this super focused on Mike Green. I want it to be more about the philosophy. Let's rattle off the names. Between injuries and behavioral, a lot of times it ends up the Cowboys use a second-round pick on a guy, Sean Lee.
Mm-hmm.
First-round talent, but he's broken, but he's going to be okay. So let's take him in the second round. And my gosh, it almost worked. And Randy Gregory.
Had it not been for Zach Martin in that training camp, his rookie season, it might have worked. Yeah. Thanks, Zach Martin.
Randy Gregory. Boy,
he's going to
give him a second chance. And that was a first-round talent
mm-hmm.
That had, and it really turns out, it's not as much drug issues as it was behavioral. And they took a chance, and they thought they could I think Jerry thinks they have a magic wand here.
Yeah.
They can wave a magic wand and fix a guy. That almost worked. Now, over the course of 5 years, Randy, like, never played, but it almost it almost worked. And so, Tim helped me out with this list. They did it not just in the draft, but they really do it at defensive line and defensive front. Alonzo Spellman,
Right.
Demetrius Underwood,
Mhm.
Greg Hardy.
Greg Hardy is the big one I think that comes out to everybody's mind, right?
Greg Hardy is one of the big ones because he was a superstar player.
Yeah.
Not here, but before that, he was a premium player. We got and then Randy Gregory and Rolando McClain is another good one.
Yeah.
So how much did Jerry? How much was it? Let's give these guys another chance. And how much was, man? Rolando McClain is a monster. And I think it's a mixture of both. The Greg Hardy, you go ahead with your Greg Hardy.
No, and look, the Cowboys got lit up by the media and the national media and the fan base for their Greg Hardy move. Jerry Jones defended it because that was really the first time he had gone out on that big of a limb, that far of a limb, was with Greg Hardy because of his issues. Because they were big issues.
Yes.
And I don't feel like it bit him, but it didn't turn out the way Jerry wanted it to.
Some of the other ones, the Spellmans and the Underwoods, they're all kind of blurring together.
Right.
Some of them were guys that ended up like running naked down the street in the snow, and the police arrested them, and it was a kind of a sad deal. In Greg Hardy's case, that was more about like criminal stuff, like women and
Guns and stuff.
all allegedly.
Yeah.
And so that's why you're right. That's why that was the higher profile thing. I'll never forget. Greg Hardy comes here. First of all, he's a very bright. Did you ever meet him?
No, I never met him.
He's no dummy.
Mhm.
He's very bright. He's very charismatic. Now, here I'm going to say this. I'm already sensing somebody's going to kill me for this. But just because you're mentally unstable or even a bad guy doesn't mean you're not charismatic and smart and charming, because Greg Hardy was all those things. So he's standing in front of his locker and everybody was scared, and I was too stupid to be scared. So I went over there and started his little mini press conference. Well, he said something funny, and I chuckled. And that tape of him saying so, that video ended up on ESPN, whatever. I mean, national media people were killing me. Who's the lady from the Washington Post? In the today mentions me saying that I'm being sympathetic for the devil, and like I called her, and I never met her. She's legendary. I said, Sally, he said something funny. I mean, it doesn't mean just because I laugh doesn't mean I support him.
What makes you an accessory to everything he did, Fish?
Right, because I smiled when he told a joke. So you're right. The national sensitivity to Greg Hardy became a gigantic issue. I don't think it scared the Cowboys off because Sam Williams had his. Even Micah had his a little bit. I guess I cross my fingers, and we'll close with this. If I'm a Cowboy fan, I cross my fingers. You can't just do it because you believe it's the American way. That's not good enough. You can't just do it because you're starving for talent. That's not good enough. Lyle Collins.
There's another one.
Okay. Now, again, that's another almost. He was pretty good.
Yeah.
They got a first-round talent as an undrafted free agent because the Cowboys did more research than everybody else. I think some Cowboy fans might not know this. I'm got to throw a bunch of allegedlys in there. People thought he murdered his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And it wasn't his girlfriend, and he didn't murder her. He had nothing to do with it, except he knew her, and he knew her.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that scared people off. Well, the Cowboys got themselves a dynamic talent there in Lyle Collins. So the bottom line here is, don't just do it, Jerry, because you're generous, and don't just do it because he runs a 4.340. Do it because you really, really have scouting and medical and psychological intel that the guy can play.
Well, and they've gotten bit a couple of times by not going that direction and taking a flyer. Randy Moss comes to mind. Warren Sapp comes to mind. All of these guys, both of those guys, Hall of Famers now, that they had some questionable character issues that Jerry was like, we don't want to touch those guys.
Yeah, don't be too scared and don't be too not scared. That's it. CowboysCountry.com is where you find us. That includes IndyCar Tim and Richie Witt and the 75-member staff. And of course, here on the Fish Report, we'll have Fish at 6 live tonight. If a blade of glass moves at the Star here in Frisco, we are on top of it. Fish.